What the fuck is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the Kevin Hoop Show, and we've got the podcast. It's Monday. It's a new year. We are finally in 2023. New year, old me. We're doing something fucking different this year, all right? We're not doing the whole new year, new me bullshit. We're doing new year, old me, all right? It's something new. It's different. I was really liking the way I was in the end of 2022. Why the fuck would I try and change that shit, huh? Anyways, with the whole entire fighting community and it being the new year, we've got a freaking quiet couple of fucking weeks. The last fight we saw was December 12th, December 10th, sometime around there. And after that, we had a UFC Invitational. There might have been a fight night, I think, with Sean Strickland and Jared Cannonier after that pay-per-view. But honestly, it's been pretty quiet the past couple of weeks. There hasn't been that many fights going on. There was that UFC Invitational, and then I think just this past Saturday or Friday, there was a Fury grappling sort of grappling event that they did on the UFC Fight Pass, which was cool. We saw Chase Hooper. We saw Andre Petroski, Rose Namajunas. Chase Hooper and Andre Petroski took the dubs in that, and Rose Namajunas actually lost in the first 10 to 20 seconds of her fight. So that was kind of interesting, but honestly, there's been not much going on lately, especially going into 2023. I don't believe that there's a fight for the UFC until January 21st, which is that big UFC fight card. Jamal Hill versus Glover Teixeira. If you didn't watch that video that I posted last week, go watch it. There's also David Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. I think that's going to be the fourth bout that they're actually having against each other. It definitely is the fourth bout, actually. They fought 3 times so far, and this one on January 21st will be the fourth. Anything other than that, I know it's in Brazil, so there's, Johnny Walker on that card and some other Brazilian fighters on that card. Nothing before, though. Nothing before. Definitely stuff happening after when it comes to fighting or fights in general. The turnaround from that January 21st pay-per-view to the next pay-per-view is only like a week or 2 weeks, because you have January 21st with that pay-per-view at the end of January, and then the following February 4th weekend is another pay-per-view weekend, but it's going to be, I believe, in Vegas, so that'll be a little different. It's not going to be over in Brazil, but it's nice that the UFC is going down to Brazil. I think there's going to be a lot of hype behind that fight in general in Brazil. The last time the UFC's been to Brazil was probably before 2020, sometime during 2019, 2018 would be my guess. But I definitely think that fight will have a lot of excitement behind it, especially from those Brazilian fans. Having the UFC coming down there for such a long time, I think will be a really good thing for them. And, that's really all that's going on in the UFC as of lately. I've talked about the Jamal Hill versus Glover Teixeira fight. I don't want to talk about it too much, just because I want to still talk about it leading up to the fight, when it actually comes fight week. Now, the Alexander Volkanovski versus Islam Makhachev fight is definitely also going to be an interesting one to look at. If you didn't look at that video that I posted sometime last week or 2 weeks ago, go check it the fuck out, all right? But a lot of people were telling me that Islam Makhachev is going to wipe the floor with Alexander Volkanovski. And it's definitely, if you were to pick one fighter, I think Islam Makhachev is the easier fighter to pick. Not only have we seen him recently, but he's had a lot of hype and motivation behind him, saying that he's the best in the division, saying that he's one of the best grapplers in the UFC, saying that no one can really submit him. You have Khabib talking about how him and his father said he's going to be the next champ. He's the best of the best. So I do think that Islam Makhachev has a little bit of that already. People are just picking him to win because he has a lot of the hype. But you cannot forget about Alexander Volkanovski, ladies and gentlemen. He has again fought and defended his belt 4 or 5 fucking times, which is not easy to do. And usually, you don't see people go past the 3rd or 4th title defense. This is now going to be his 5th or 6th title defense. And honestly, I still go with Volkanovski. And granted, I've been watching Volkanovski more. I'm probably more of a fan than I am of him than Islam. Nothing against Islam Makhachev. I'm definitely a big fan of him. But just when it comes to these fighters facing each other, I am a big fan of Alexander Volkanovski's mindset and also the way he trains, which I'm sure is very similar to Islam Makhachev's. Maybe not similar, but, I'm sure Islam Makhachev is saying the same things of, I'm not just going to give up. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to have to be submitted or die out there. Things along the lines of that, which is definitely around the same mindset. But I think the way Alexander Volkanovski goes about it, he's such a playful guy. He has that Australian type of vibe to him. And it just seems like he's, a really good person. He's definitely nice to people. But he also jokes around a lot. He shoots the shit. He makes fun of his friends. And I definitely vibe with that a little bit more than the super serious Islam Makhachev. And not saying that there's shady business going on behind the scenes. But, there's just I feel like it's almost a front that he puts up to the camera and whatnot. Maybe he's just, not a very open person. But I feel like with Volk, he's very open about his life. He's very open about the decisions that he's making. And, just having that communication with your fan base definitely will help create more fans. And I definitely think that I ride with Volkanovski more as a fan, more than I do with Islam Makhachev. Especially if you just look at the fact that Alexander Volkanovski is trying to do a YouTube channel. He's trying to grow his brand outside of the UFC, which is good for any UFC fighter. I don't think you see that much from Islam Makhachev. But you also see such just a great fighter who is really focused on winning. A thing that I wanted to bring up that I didn't hit on my last video in that Alexander Volkanovski and Islam video was there was rumors, there was a lot of talk when Islam beat Charles Oliveira that Khabib or whoever was, high in the Russian hierarchy or whatever, or it was Khabib or some rich Russian or whoever was behind in the behind the scenes in Islam's camp, helped him and fronted $1 million to have him be in top physical performance. So basically invested $1 million into his fight camp, into his training camp, for him to have the best possible preparation for fighting Charles Oliveira. Now, if anybody has a fucking $1 million fight camp or, so much money going into so many different things that are involved in their fight camp, you better be fucking winning that fight. I'll tell you that for damn sure. That's like somebody investing $1 million into a company, hoping that that company will get to $1 billion in market share or whatever, and that company completely just going bankrupt, basically, and losing your $1 million investment. So I don't think that Islam Makhachev had much of a chance to lose this fight, but it also did add a lot of pressure. If people have that much preparation and are expecting certain things from you, that can put a lot of pressure on somebody. And if he dealt with that pressure well, obviously, but I also don't know, how much pressure himself he was actually feeling. I'm sure he was feeling pressure, but I'm just saying how much pressure was it from the people behind the scenes in his fight camp, or just people around him, family, putting pressure on him, because I do know that Russian culture is very, very invested in the arts, or, certain things about, the way the world works when it comes to fighting, when it comes to actual art, when it comes to acting. I actually didn't know a lot about how big acting was in Russia until a John Bernthal interview on Rogan, and it actually opened my eyes up to, wow, these people over there in Europe or Asia or in Russia specifically don't necessarily have just a big brute mindset. They're not just all strong-faced, no emotion, killer mindsets. Some of them, or they do have a respect for arts when it comes to painting, when it comes to acting, when it comes to performing in certain aspects that are other than fighting. They still have a huge respect for that. The same way they have respect for fighting and people, going out trying to take each other's heads off, which is, definitely fucking savage. They treat, painting, acting, other things like that with the same sort of mentality and respect, which I think is really cool because I do think that some people, have a certain mentality on acting or painting when it comes to America. And there definitely is a respect that those people deserve, especially for the people that are at the top of that craft. The top 1% of people doing that out there. There's definitely a respect. There's definitely a skill that goes to it. And I think some of that respect gets a little bit lost when it comes to those certain things. I really didn't even plan on talking about Islam Makhachev or Alexander Volkanovski, but hey, I fucking touched on it a little bit. We're gonna keep on moving on into what I really wanted to talk about, which it's not really necessarily that I really wanted to talk about this. I've been questioning it the past couple weeks, and the fact that we've got a few open weeks to talk about whatever we really want. We might as well talk about KSI versus Dillon Danis. It's almost like the elephant in the room. It's happening. It's getting talked about. It's not really that exciting, honestly. At least from my point of view. I think you have Dillon Danis, who has a big background in jiu-jitsu. And you definitely don't see, if not, you haven't seen at all, this hasn't happened before, of a jiu-jitsu practitioner actually transferring over into boxing. You have seen it before where you see jiu-jitsu practitioners transfer over into mixed martial arts, but you don't really necessarily per se see that when it comes to jiu-jitsu practitioners going into strictly boxing. And the reason being, it's kind of fucking obvious if you haven't noticed it already. In mixed martial arts, you still have the opportunity to take the fight to the ground. So you still can use your jiu-jitsu in a mixed martial arts fight. In boxing, you can't kick, you can't, take anybody down. There's a little clinch you can kind of get into when it comes to trying to get like underhooks and overhooks on your opponent. But even that, it's really just people or boxers do that to kind of rejuvenate their rejuvenate their cardio, to get a breath real quick, to get some breathing in where they're not necessarily exerting a lot of energy. So I don't think that's going to have much of an effect to Dillon Danis', clinch aspect of his game when it comes to boxing. But I think an interesting thing to talk about is their two records. Both of their records, obviously not being in the same sport, but Dillon Danis does have a record in mixed martial arts of 2-0, and KSI does have a boxing record of 3-0. Now, one of them, I guess two of them were against Logan Paul. I guess his record technically is, well, I should also say this. His record in professional boxing is 3-0. His record in boxing as a whole, including amateur boxing, I guess would be, if that's a thing, amateur boxing and professional boxing, it would be 3-0-1. Or I guess if you want to say his professional career is 3-0 and his amateur career is 1-0-1 or something like that. I know he has a win against Joe Weller as an amateur, as well as a tie with Logan Paul. And then as a professional, he has one win over Logan Paul by split decision, and then I believe two other knockouts or technical knockouts against really... Apparently one guy was a footballer and then turned rapper, and then another one was a boxer, professional boxer. But his record as a professional boxer was like 2-6. So honestly, the guy's not that impressive if he's fighting a guy that's 2-6. Not saying KSI is not impressive, but fighting a 2-6 guy, you can't be fucking going around thinking that you're the shit if you beat someone that's 2-6. You have Jake Paul, just as another example of some YouTuber turned boxer who's now facing Anderson Silva, calling out Nate Diaz. Those are fucking killers. These aren't people that are 2-6. Like, come on, KSI. And I have respect for him a little bit now that he's fighting Dillon Danis. At the same time, though, it's kind of that same thing. If Dillon Danis does not have any boxing experience in the ring, yes, he has striking experience, but his background is all grappling. I'm not saying he hasn't been doing a little bit of striking while training grappling, but most likely if this dude is competing in fucking ADCC, he's not training boxing at the same fucking time. For those of you that don't know what ADCC is, it's the Abu Dhabi Championships of Grappling, basically, and is the Olympic level of grappling at the jiu-jitsu or in the jiu-jitsu field of grappling. So, why the fuck would you think that Dillon Danis is a good fight for you to say, like, after I beat Dillon Danis, I can fight Jake Paul? No, you can fucking not. Dillon Danis is nothing like Anderson Silva. Dillon Danis is nothing like Tyrone Woodley. And Jake Paul made those fights, maybe not against Anderson Silva, but definitely against Tyrone Woodley and Ben Askren. He made it look like light work. Light work, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm not the biggest Jake Paul fan, but if you just compare what Jake Paul's doing in boxing compared to what KSI's doing in boxing, get this shit out of here. It's for my freaking mic stand. If you look at this thing, it's just all messed up, so that's why I'm holding the mic today. Get that shit out of here. I would throw it completely, but there's expensive things behind here in the studio. So, we got to be somewhat conscious of what we're doing. Kind of like what KSI, I think, should be doing. He should be a little bit conscious of what the fuck he's doing. And if his whole entire long-term plan, if you want to think of things like that, I know he's big into rapping. I know he's a big YouTuber. Why, though, would you take a break from boxing, come back to boxing, while still calling out Jake Paul this entire time, basically, saying how you can beat Jake Paul, but you're also doing rapping, but you're also doing YouTube, and you're really not training that much boxing, at least from a fan's point of view, from an outsider's perspective. So, with that, why would you fight Dillon Danis if you want to fight Jake Paul next? In my opinion, if I'm Jake Paul, you beating Dillon Danis shows me nothing. That shows me, yeah, you still kind of can fight. You're still learning. But if you beat Dillon Danis at the end of the day, it just tells me that you have to fight someone that is a more experienced MMA practitioner that is looking to retire, or you actually have to fight an experienced boxer. Maybe somebody like Tommy Fury, who's, not 2-6, has somewhat of a good professional boxing record, and, somewhat of a name in boxing from the way it looks. I'm not, the biggest boxing fan or the biggest boxing viewer, so I'm not even too sure about how Tyson Fury is when it comes to boxing. But it seems like he has his name out there a little bit in the boxing world, especially compared to Dillon Danis. Now, Dillon Danis, and I like how Gordon Ryan talks about this as well. Dillon Danis is the king at staying relevant when he's doing nothing. He hasn't. We haven't seen him in the ring, in the octagon, on the mat. We haven't seen him in over 2 years. I think it's coming up on that kind of date. And yes, there was COVID and everything with that, but he was also, I think he said from his, straight from the cat's mouth, from his mouth, from Dillon Danis' mouth itself, he said that he was dealing with a knee injury, got a knee replacement or some knee graft, and the surgery basically didn't go well, and he had to get the same surgery a second time. And the second time it worked, but because he had to deal with it twice, it was just a longer rehabilitation period. It was a longer time for him to heal. So, I think there's a lot of he said, she said when it comes to that stuff. Any fighter can say that they were injured, but where were you doing physical therapy, posting that stuff on Instagram and IG during that time period? How much physical therapy were you doing compared to sitting on the couch trying to tweet out tweets to try and make yourself more relevant, or going out trying to fight boxers or getting street brawls left and right? And again, I'm not the biggest Dillon Danis fan. I'm not the biggest follower of Dillon Danis. I don't keep up with him all the time. I think just recently I followed him on Twitter from him being on Ariel Helwani. But when it comes to Dillon Danis, I don't know how much of what he says is actually true. That's a big thing that I don't really like about him, to be honest. If I'm watching somebody, either I know that they're shit talking just to, get a vote out of the fans, to try to provoke the fans a little bit. But sometimes when he says stuff, I'm really questioning, is that just a bold-faced lie? Is that something that people are actually thinking about? And one of those things he's talking about is, and I don't think the second part of this is a lie, but the first part is when he talks about the fight potentially not happening. Now, this might just be something to, provoke the fans, to get more of a rile up out of the KSI camp. Who the fuck knows? But just saying you don't know if the fight's going to happen, it doesn't look good for viewers. It doesn't make me want to go out and buy the fight if you yourself don't even know if you're going to be fighting that night. Just in that aspect, I don't like it. And number two, he's talking about the rehydration test or the hydration test and weighing in the day after weigh-ins. So the actual day of the fight, they're requiring, I guess, both Dillon Danis and KSI. I don't know if it's all of the fighters. I don't know if it's just for this main event. Again, that's all behind the scenes bullshit that they're trying to fucking figure out, or just saying bold-faced lies, which again, it's hard to tell. But I do think that the rehydration part we have seen in other sports like ONE FC. And what it basically says is you have to weigh in the day of the fight 4 to 5 pounds within what you weighed in the day before. So if you have a fight that's at 160 pounds, if you weigh in at 160 on weigh-in day, which is usually the day right before the fights, on fight day you have to be within 4 to 5 pounds of that 160 weight. Obviously, most likely being over. So usually you're not going to see people weigh in at 160 and weigh 155 the next day. People wouldn't complain then. But what people will complain is if people weigh in at 160 weigh-in day and come fight day, they walk into the ring, they walk into the cage 170, 180 all of a sudden. They gain 10 to 20 pounds within a day. Usually it being water weight that they lose, but, some fighters are a little different than others when it comes to weight cuts. So I think that that's an interesting aspect to think about of why maybe Dillon Danis doesn't want to take the fight or would back out last minute. Not saying Dillon Danis is going to back out last minute, but he's already giving the excuse. He's laid out the route for him to take when it comes to exiting the fight. He has his plan B exit. So I might be wasting my time talking about this right fucking now. I don't know, but if you're asking me who's going to win this fight, I would probably be leaning towards KSI at this point. If you asked me before all of this bullshit happened with Ariel Helwani and Dillon Danis, and Dillon Danis finally actually showing himself on interviews, number one, the dude kind of looked a little, not drunk or anything, but just a little out of it. He seemed like he's been definitely sitting on the couch for a little too long in his recent months of doing whatever the fuck he's been doing. Again, whether it's in physical therapy, whether it's been trying to actually get better, whether it's been drinking and partying, who the fuck knows? There was a lot of rumors going about him drinking and not really doing any fucking training. So that's just Dillon Danis for you, I guess. I don't really think he's going to have much of a future in the fight game in general if he keeps this shit up. Especially when it comes to all these street fights. He keeps on talking about I don't care who the fuck you are. If you are Billy Bob Joe, if you're fucking John Jones, you have the ability to be the bigger man and to not put yourself in a brawl, in a street fight, in whatever the case is where you are when it happens. Dillon Danis likes to put himself in those situations, in my opinion. Now, he says everyone's trying to fight him. Everyone's trying to, because he has such a big name, because whenever his name is used, people get viewers or followers from it. I think that's one of the biggest bullshit things, in my opinion. I didn't start watching Dillon Danis until he was on the Ariel Helwani show, and that's when I actually figured out about all these street brawls he's been in recently. Now, he can twist the word, he can twist the story however the fuck he wants. In my opinion, him being in street brawls and stuff like that puts his name out there more. That's his mentality. In my opinion, it just looks unprofessional. Especially if it's boxers and people that you're really not even in the same circle with. The MMA community is a little bit different than the boxing community. And, there's not necessarily the easiest crossover between fans and fighters. So, I get why he's around boxing people. Why he's around these boxers at the time. If he's training for KSI, he wants to get boxers around him. But obviously he's getting the wrong type of boxers around him if these guys are trying to fight him or whatever situation he's putting himself in, he's got to stop, basically. Talking more about this whole entire fight and more about the actual, more about the glitz and glamour, I guess, because that was a lot of the rumors and shit like that. But talking about more about their records, Dillon Danis is 2-0. KSI is 3-0 professionally. I do think the one thing that he did was pretty impressive. He did beat that whole entire football guy turned rapper turned boxer. He beat him, and in the same night, actually, that he beat him, he beat that 2-6 boxer. So I do think that is a little impressive. I also think that that's good to have experience-wise from KSI. It shows that you've got a little bit of a gas tank for sure, and it shows that you're definitely on the right path. But my thing with that is that was almost a year ago. That was almost 2 years ago. So how much have you been training? How much can you keep up with how you looked then to how you're going to look now? That's a big thing that I'm questioning. And with that, I would probably, if we see the same KSI we saw then, but way improved, because there's only been a year to 2 years, with that amount of time, he should have improved dramatically. He should have improved in multiple ways in his game. I didn't watch those two fights. I do know in the last Logan Paul fight, he still had that really wild type of style. Kind of crazy and just throwing haymakers very wide, opening himself up a lot. And if he has that same style against Dillon Danis, it's not going to work. I can just tell you that right now. Dillon Danis, he's fought, with guys like Conor McGregor. He has been in Conor McGregor's training camp. This dude does know how to throw a punch. So if KSI hasn't, really toned in on things that are weaknesses in his game, I do think he's going to struggle. But if we see an improved KSI from the last time we saw him in the ring professionally, I do believe we will see a KSI win. I do think that this fight was picked very strategically from his team. Dillon Danis is only 2-0 in MMA. I don't even know those two fights personally. I don't know how they went. Obviously he won. I don't know if he won by decision. Actually, I do know how he won by it was 2 wins by submission. That is what I read in the article. I could be wrong, but if they didn't go to a split decision, which knowing Dillon Danis' background with jiu-jitsu, they probably did go to a submission ending. So that's good for him. At the same time, when you're thinking about that, as my flag falls, really, right during set, man, come on. The production during this was just phenomenal. With that whole entire Dillon Danis, if he did bring the fight to the ground quickly, that might be a sign that he might not have a good striking experience. Which, let's take a step back and look at this for a little bit, ladies and gents. So, skip a year, 2 years ago, Logan Paul versus Ben Askren. Everybody thought Ben Askren was going to win this fight. Everyone thought it was going to at least be very hard for Jake Paul to win. And Jake Paul completely destroyed Ben Askren within the first round, I think. So, how did Jake Paul win that fight? He won that fight when he first picked Ben Askren. He knew when he picked Ben Askren, he was already going to win. All he had to do was put in the work. And, putting in the work can definitely be a big challenge. But in picking the right opponent, I think that is one of the biggest things that Jake Paul has going for him right now. He has the ability to pick his opponents, and his opponent says, this is the biggest fight day of my whole entire career. I'm going to take this whether this Jake Paul dude is a real deal or not. So I think that is where Jake Paul wins before the fight even happens. Now I think KSI takes that same sort of game plan, incorporates that into his game plan, and boom, he might win before the whole entire fight even happens. He might win just because he picked Dillon Danis. Just because Dillon Danis has that little bit of hype behind his name, a little bit of traction behind his name. But to be honest, what experience does he have in boxing? None. He has zero experience being in a boxing ring with tons of fans. Zero. Zilch. None. Nada. So, will that affect Dillon Danis, especially, I believe the fight's in London. I could be wrong there, but I believe the fight's in London, hinting that the whole entire fan base is going to be rooting for KSI. No ifs, ands, or buts. Look at it with Logan Paul, who has way more of a fan base on YouTube and more than Dillon Danis. And that dude got paint cans thrown at his fucking Rolls Royce. So, if that's happening to Logan Paul, I think Dillon Danis is definitely going to have a little eye-opening experience going to London with that fan base of KSI. I really hope I didn't just talk about that whole entire Dillon Danis and KSI thing for 30 minutes, but I might have. I know I did talk about Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volk a little bit as well. Moving the fuck on. I talked about it a little bit in the beginning. Gordon fucking Ryan, the king. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know who Gordon Ryan is, I'll tell you. He is one of, if not the greatest of all time in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu no-gi grappling. He's been making a name for himself for probably the past 5 to 7 years. I know his competition really started to grow in 2016, maybe a little bit in 2015 as well, but he was definitely competing at that time. Now, he got really big come 2017 ADCC. I do believe he won gold there, and then did it again in 2019 ADCC, and then again at 2022 ADCC. Again, if you don't know what the ADCC event is, it is basically the Olympics of grappling. So, when you have somebody like this winning that consistently and that often, and the way he did it in the most recent ADCC in 2022 against Andre Galvao in the super fight, as well as winning his weight division, it's just almost, it is unheard of. No one has ever done that before in a ADCC. So, not only is he doing things that has never been done before, but he's shit-talking basically compared to Conor McGregor. That's the only person I can compare him to. Because not only does he walk the walk, he fucking talks the fucking talk probably more than Conor McGregor does. He shit talks everybody, not only on social media, but as well on, probably a little less in interviews. Maybe a little bit in podcasts and interviews, maybe a little. But on social media, the dude is fucking ruthless. He'll come at you, family. He'll come at you fucking going on vacation. He'll come at you freaking sitting around on the couch with your girlfriend. He doesn't give a shit. But he backs it up. He backs it the fuck up, which is not only why people love him, but also why people, I think, want to see him lose. Me personally, I love it. I fucking love that shit. Someone that can talk shit and back it up is it's not only satisfying to do that, but it's fucking awesome to watch. It's just entertaining to watch. So, the fact that he's making jiu-jitsu so big right now by doing that, I think is also a humongous and awesome thing for the sport. I train jiu-jitsu myself, so there's nothing more than I want to see jiu-jitsu being mainstream. I would love to see jiu-jitsu be one of the most watched sports in, MMA or in the fighting game, I guess you could say. Especially because grappling in general has a stigma to it. Grappling definitely can be a little less entertaining to watch to a non-experienced grappler or someone that doesn't understand where the fight is going when it goes to the ground or when the grappling starts to happen. They may not understand who's winning the exchange, who has more control than the other person. So there definitely can be some reasons why jiu-jitsu or grappling in general has fallen behind or has slowly progressed compared to these other martial arts or mixed martial arts in general. I do think, though, that Gordon Ryan is bringing this sport mainstream and at a pace that nobody has before. We've seen Royce Gracie. We've seen Kron Gracie, which really, didn't do much. I don't even think a lot of people know Kron Gracie, to be honest. But Gary Tonin, I think, was also a really big person who kind of is trying to push that jiu-jitsu stigma of trying to make it mainstream, and by doing that in MMA. Now, if you see and look at the history of jiu-jitsu, a lot of jiu-jitsu started back in Brazil with the Gracies. Then you see Royce go into the UFC and completely dominate everybody. Ken Shamrock versus Royce Gracie. Absolutely phenomenal trilogy fight. But you see Royce Gracie show his jiu-jitsu off and show how good and how better it is than striking with somebody, how better and more efficient it is to have somebody on the ground and work on a submission compared to constantly working on a knockout. So with that, I think you saw the first introduction to jiu-jitsu to the main public, to the I don't want to say mainstream, because it wasn't necessarily everybody looking at it, but nowadays you see everybody in the UFC either know a little bit about wrestling and how to defend a takedown, or at least the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu and how to pull guard, how to get out of guard, how to pass guard, things like that. So I think that since Gordon Ryan has been fighting in no-gi, it's really starting to bring normalcy to, hey, this is, something that's very similar to boxing or striking. It's just on the ground. I think the gi kind of gave it a stigma, or had a stigma to it. And definitely, I never really noticed this myself until I heard about Eddie Bravo talking about it. And it made so much fucking sense when I heard it. And the thing is, with gi fighting in jiu-jitsu, you have a lot more stalling than you do with no-gi. And the reason for that being because the holds and the grips that you go for with gi are all around the actual gi. You're not really ever grabbing the neck or grabbing someone's wrist. And obviously you are in certain situations. But a lot of the times when you're trying to fight for positional control, you're stalling almost in trying to see who's going to have the better grip or who lets go first almost. So I think that added a little bit, or held the sport back a little bit in becoming mainstream sooner. And I think that with such a dominant person in the game right now with Gordon Ryan, he's definitely bringing this game somewhere that it hasn't been brought before. And I'm excited for that. I think the UFC is definitely also excited for that. They wouldn't host a UFC Invitational and have just grappling be around it if they weren't going to try and, I think, grow the sport as well in the next year of 2023. So it's just one thing that I'm excited to look for in general. I think Gordon Ryan's going to be a lot more or fighting a lot more frequently. He's already scheduled for February 25th against Felipe Pena. I think I pronounced that right. Yeah, Felipe Pena. He's fought him 1 or 2 times, maybe 3 times before. I think they have fought 3 times before. So to go back and kind of summarize them, the first fight, Gordon Ryan lost. The second fight, well, I should say this. The first fight, Gordon Ryan lost via submission. So he actually got submitted and tapped. The second fight, Gordon Ryan lost again, but by points. For those of you that don't know, if there's a time limit to one of these grappling exchanges, especially with these super fights, you sometimes see no time limits. But if there are time limits, it can either go to a judge's decision, or you can win by points, or you can go to an EBI overtime rule set, which is someone goes to have somebody's back control and the other person has to get out of that back control, and then it goes basically all on riding time. Or if that person having back control actually gets the submission, the person who got submitted has to then put in the submission as fast or faster to win than the other person. So that is one thing that there is to think about. I don't know too much about this rule set that they're having. I do know the last fight, I said there was 3. I only named 2. The third one, Gordon Ryan won via verbal submission in a no time limit match. So 2-1 against, 2 wins against 1 win. I think the big thing to think about is Gordon Ryan lost that first one probably 4 to 5 years ago at this point. It was when he first got his black belt, and a big thing that he's wanted to do is beat the people who have beaten him at black belt. And let me tell you this, it was a very short list. Felipe Pena was one. Vinny Mangalis was another one who he was supposed to fight on this past UFC Invitational, but Vinny tried to cut like 40 or 50 pounds or tried to cut 40 or 50 pounds and ended up going into some kidney failure and having to get hospitalized, which is not good at all. I think he also might have lost to Dillon Danis at black belt. I could be wrong there, but I think he lost to Dillon Danis at that 2017 ADCC. I could be wrong. I think I said he got gold there. Not 100% sure. I should have looked that up a little bit beforehand. That's my fault. But, it's not that hard of a Google search. It's not that hard of a Google search to do. Let me do it right now. Dillon Danis versus Gordon Ryan. Dillon Danis versus Gordon Ryan. Here it is. Google search. Gordon Ryan versus Dillon Danis, ADCC 2017. I was exactly right on when it happened. So I'm assuming if Gordon Ryan lost this, then he definitely didn't get gold. Ooh, one thing I actually want to see is that there is a time limit, which obviously it's ADCC. I wonder actually how he lost. Let's see, we're going to go here. I'm assuming TB1. I wonder what that means. So first, see, that's the thing I don't understand about these rule sets necessarily, is a lot of rule sets can be different with grappling, especially when it comes to overtime. I don't know if TB1 is just overtime 1 or something like that, or if something happens after TB1, but it looks like TB1 is about to come to an end here. 3, yep, that one ended. So it's going to go to a judge's decision, and it looks like when it goes to a judge's decision, it looks like Dillon Danis won. I mean, it doesn't actually show him winning in the actual video, but on the record books, Dillon Danis has the loss. So That's definitely an interesting thing to think about when it comes to maybe what Gordon Ryan's going to do in 2023. Maybe he wants to fight Dillon Danis again. I know on Ariel Helwani, when Gordon Ryan was on there, he was definitely open to fighting Dillon Danis again. So I don't see why that shouldn't or couldn't happen in 2023. Another thing I want to talk about some of these fights that I want to personally look forward to in 2023. We've got the return of John Jones. So there's been a lot of talk about whether John Jones is going to come back or not. Are we going to see John Jones versus Stipe? There's been so much talk about John Jones versus Francis that should have already been scheduled at this point with how much it was talked about. So I do think that this John Jones aspect of him coming back is interesting to think about for a lot of reasons. Obviously, he left at light heavyweight. He was fighting at light heavyweight before he quit or vacated the title, however you want to say it. Why he did that was to save fighter pay and all this bullshit. Who knows why? To be honest, I think it's still a big question mark. There's no one that wants to see John Jones in the ring more than me. He was one of the people that I was watching and started watching because when I first started watching the UFC, it was around 2017, 2018. So at the time, I was trying to figure out who the best of the best was, the pound for pound number one. And at the time, John Jones was always regarded as the number one, as the pound for pound number one. But I think during 2017, 2018 is when he was going through that whole suspension. So I never got to see him actually fight live in 2017, 2018. But in 2019, that motherfucker came back. And I had already watched all of his fights leading up to that. So I had caught myself up, basically. I was still a big John Jones fan. I still wanted him to do good. He fought Anthony Lionheart Smith, won that. Fought Thiago Santos, won that. Anthony Lionheart Smith won that. Dominic Reyes. I might have said the Anthony Lionheart Smith twice. I wouldn't say Dominic Reyes won that. Gustafsson 2 won that. Even just saying all those names, that's pretty fucking impressive. In what, a 1 to 2 year time span? He did that in 2019 to 2020, 2018 to 2020. I think that's pretty fucking impressive if you ask me. I don't think he was fighting at all during 2018, maybe at the end. Again, I could be wrong. I should have checked some of that. But I want to see him back in 2023. I say it's a big question mark still, but we haven't seen Francis at all. There's been no rumors of who Francis is going to face next. And I don't think Steve Bay is going to be fighting anytime soon either. If not, that bull's retired at this point. So where is John Jones and who is he going to be facing next? That's my question for you guys. Let me know in the comments. I guess this is going to be me asking you guys shit. But if you guys want to ask me questions for me to answer in the next video, please ask me any question you have. I saw some of the people talking about the Jamal Hill and Glover Teixeira fight a little bit, which, hey, it's a fight that's happening in 2023. Let me know who you guys think is going to win, because a lot of people, I think, are saying it's a 50-50 fight, which Jamal Hill's ranked 7, Glover Teixeira's ranked 2. I think the only thing that makes it even is the age difference. The age difference, to me, is what makes it 50-50. Now, I think if you look at Glover Teixeira in his last 2 fights or last fight against Yuri Prohovich, I know I also said that wrong in the last video. I said Yuri Blachowicz or something like that. But Yuri Prohovich, if you look at his fight, if you look at Glover Teixeira's fight with him in his last fight, he looked phenomenal. The thing to question, though, is how many times at that age are you going to be looking phenomenal? I think it's, you have to try extremely hard. There's a lot of things that you need to go your way in order for you to look phenomenal in those fights and for you to be, well prepared and be ready. You can't have any injuries one injury at that age can really affect you. Just look at T.J. Dillashaw with his shoulder injury against Aljamain. You know, he's getting up there a little bit in his years, and that shoulder injury just kept on popping. It kept on popping out of place. So I'm not saying Glover Teixeira is dealing with an injury, but making sure that he's as good as that Yuri Prohovich fight, I think, is very important. And if he can't get to that level, I think instead of being at 50-50, it's probably more 70-30 for Jamal Hill. And that's really big because going from 7 to having the belt, that might be one of the craziest jumps that we've seen in the UFC. Maybe not one of the craziest, but a pretty big fucking jump in the UFC for anybody, in my opinion. So let me know what you guys think about John Jones coming back. Let me know what you guys think about the Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill matchup. I already talked about that, though, so if you want to go look at the video, I uploaded it Friday. Why didn't you watch it Friday, huh? Come on, guys, come on. Will he go against Stipe or Francis? I heard just this about a week or 2 weeks ago on an interview. They were like, John Jones is going to be coming back or not. You know, the same thing I'm fucking saying. But then a lot of people were like, well, is he going to fight Stipe or Francis? It's the same thing I'm talking about in this one, ladies and gents. You tell me. Jorge Masvidal. This motherfucker had one of the biggest years any UFC fighter can have. The dude literally got a belt made after him and for him for the two guys that were fighting for that belt. You know, I think him and Nate Diaz were probably one of the biggest fighters at that time without having ever attained the belt. As in saying the gold belt, you know, the championship of your division type of belt. I wouldn't say Nate Diaz doesn't have the capability of doing that. He might have won the interim belt 1 or 2 times, but same thing with Jorge Masvidal. He might have won the interim belt 1 or 2 times in his career, but definitely didn't actually own the belt, you know. So I think that him having such a big year in 2019, COVID definitely probably affected his fighting a little bit and when he wanted to fight. Lost against Colby Covington twice, or no, fought for the belt and lost twice. So I think both of them were Usman, obviously. He was the only person who held the belt at the time. Colby Covington has fought Usman twice, I believe, for the belt. Might be getting that mixed up, but that's okay. Either way, I want to say I want to see Jorge Masvidal at least 2 or 3 times this year. And if I don't, I'm going to be saying that you're out the door, dude. You're on the way out. I'm not saying you're retiring, but you're on the way out. He's been in the game for a very long time. He's probably, gotten a lot of damage over the years, and it's been like, all right, I got my money. Let's, either fight for some big money fights or I'm done. So, or maybe goes into a different promotion. Who knows? Maybe he goes and fights Jake Paul. So that might be what we see Jorge Masvidal next. Sean O'Malley and Paddy Pimblett are the two last things I kind of want to wrap this up on, basically because they're obviously the UFC's rock stars right now. And what I mean by that is they're the young guys that have a big following behind them. Everybody in the UFC fan base-wise, maybe a little less now after that Paddy Pimblett fight, the most recent one against Jared Gordon. But a lot of people in the UFC fan base want to see these two fight. Not against each other, but they just want to see each other fight in their own divisions. Now, Sean O'Malley is ranked 3, top 5 in that division. Top 3, top 5 in that division now. So, believe that's a bantamweight. And Paddy Pimblett is not even ranked in the lightweight division. So, I do think that Paddy Pimblett is going to need to fight at least 3 times this year to get where he wants to be in fighting for a belt soon. Definitely going to have to fight 3 times this year. Same thing he did last year. We're going to need to see him sometime in the first quarter, sometime maybe in the second or third, and then again at the fourth quarter. If you don't know what I mean by quarters, I just mean like business-wise quarters. The first 3 months is the first. The second 6 months is the second. Then 9 months is the third, and 12 months is the fourth. Yeah. Everybody should know that at this point if you're watching this video. Either way, I think that both of these fighters, they're on the rise. The question is their skill level. I think both of them, honestly, they were on the same exact trajectory. Both of them were on the same sort of angle. They were just going up. And then after both of their most recent fights, it was like, oh shit, what's happening now with my trajectory? And sorry for this, it looked kind of fucking retarded, but my point being, after each of their fights, there was a big talk about the judges' decisions and it being a robbery. It should have went the other way. I definitely think more so with Paddy Pimblett's fight compared to Sean O'Malley's fight. I think Sean O'Malley showed a lot more compared to what Paddy Pimblett showed. At the same time, Paddy Pimblett didn't really... He just didn't show what Sean O'Malley showed, I think, which is being in that third round, still showing up. Sean O'Malley showed up in the third fucking round of that fight. Paddy Pimblett stood there and said, let's go, and just go along the cage for the rest of this fucking round, which I bet you we will never see him do ever again. Whether his foot fucking hurts, is broken, or is falling off, we will not see Paddy Pimblett do that because it affected his bottom line fan base. And what I mean by that is a lot of people thought Jared Gordon had won that fight. Whether it was because how Paddy Pimblett was in the third round or not, a lot of people had Jared Gordon winning. And that's including me. I was someone that was a big fan of Paddy Pimblett going up and leading into this fight. And after the Jared Gordon loss, or Jared Gordon fight, I should say, I really thought that he needs to go back to the drawing board and focus on his weaknesses. And as well as take these fights more seriously. And, bulking up to 200 plus pounds, it's just not professional, dude. At this point in your career, you have so much on the line. Why the fuck are you not being disciplined enough to eat right? I'm someone that, used to be really fat in my younger ages and have been doing nothing but working on trying to eat healthy. And yes, it's hard to do. But Monday through Friday, I stay super strict to a diet of eating fish or chicken along with fruits and veggies. That's it. That's all I have. And also eating once a day. That's just me personally. But I think if, someone like me, my career doesn't rely on how much I weigh. That's just me personally trying to go out and be the best I can be. And I understand a lot of fighters have an unhealthy relationship with food in general. But if you're going to be taking this shit seriously and you want to... Not even if you want to take the shit seriously. I think he takes the shit seriously. But if you want to be known as one of the greats, if you want to capitalize on this opportunity that you have of being in the UFC and having such a big fan base behind you, I think, things like that, things that can happen like that is a thing like your fan base getting lost after a loss like you just had. I'm not saying his whole entire fan base is gone. I still think he has a big fan base behind him. But I think the more and more that we see that, dude, a lot more of his fan bases are going to be saying, dude, we're out. Like, you just didn't take this shit seriously. Come on. And that's just me. I'm just one person. That's just me looking at it from afar saying he could have done so much more, in my opinion, to prepare for this fight in the right way, and he didn't. So that's my thoughts on that. I think this is probably one of the longest podcasts I've done recently, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I might have been a little bit more in a calm demeanor. It's fucking the morning time when I'm shooting this, and my nose is a little congested, so I was just more or less trying to keep a cool, calm, collected interview here, or one-on-one conversation here. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what your thoughts on everything that I talked about whether it comes to Gordon Ryan, whether it comes to KSI versus Dillon Danis, or fights that you guys want to see in 2023. Let me know in the comments. I always respond to everybody's comments, no matter if you're shit talking me or if you hate this person or if you don't like that person. I will respond in some way, shape, or form just to say, hey, man, I really appreciate you commenting on my videos. As for anybody, and some of you guys are definitely bringing really good opinions and really good questions that I'm liking and that I'm answering. So keep on bringing them, ladies and gents. As well as don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. I know that we are growing at a fast pace, at least for me. Just 3 months ago, we only had about 5 to 10 subscribers, and we're already at 50 plus subscribers right now. So to any of you guys that have subscribed and keep on watching my videos, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be bringing nothing but the same entertainment, if not more, of entertainment value and entertainment purposes to the UFC and to these UFC fights and matchups that we have in this mixed martial arts community. So hopefully you guys enjoyed, and again, thank you guys for watching this video and subscribing and doing everything that you guys can to just show that you guys support this channel. So with that, again, thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. We're going to be doing nothing but going full speed ahead in 2023, so expect nothing but the best in 2023 from this channel. And with that, have a great fucking day. Bada bing, bada boom.